Hello class, welcome to another video notes. So let's get right to it. First of all, we are learning 2A.3a, that's the TEKS that we're learning about, and this one states you need to learn how to formulate systems of inequalities and equations. So we're not just going to formulate these, but we're also going to learn how to solve these. Hopefully you remember from Algebra 1 the different methods of solving these. If not, we'll refresh your memory. So let's take a look at the directions. Solve each problem using a system of equations. Okay? So we have 8 pens and 7 pencils cost $3.37, while 5 pens and 11 pencils cost $3.10. What is the cost of each pen and each pencil? Well, the first thing you want to do in these problems is you want to look at what you're looking for. You're looking for the cost of each pen and each pencil. So we're going to need a variable for both of these, since we don't know. We don't know how much each pen costs, and we don't know how much each pencil costs. So over here, now normally I would use the first letter to represent pen, P, but notice pencil has the same letter. Notice there's not really a letter that you could use. I suppose you could use P for pen and C for pencil, but I'm going to go ahead and use the old X and Y. So I'm going to go over here and define my variables. So X is going to represent the cost of each pen. Y will represent the cost of each pencil. That way, when I use these variables, I know what they stand for, what they represent. Okay, so we have 8, that's how many pens we're going to buy, pens, 7 pencils, and their total cost is $3.37. This is pretty straightforward. We want 8 pens, so we're going to have 8, we would multiply 8 times X. Because if each pen, let's just say, costs $1, 8 times $1 would be $8. Well, obviously that's not true because the total is only $3.37. So using a little common sense here, So let's take a look. So we're going to add the cost of the pencils. So we got 7 of them, and the cost of each one is Y. And our total is $3.37. Okay? Next equation, we have 5 pens, we have 11 pencils, so adding the cost of them together, we get $3.10. Excellent. Now, how will we solve this? Well, in Algebra 1, you were taught that you could solve a problem like this using 3 different methods. You could use graphing, you could use substitution, or you could use elimination. So we would choose which method we'd want to solve here. And I'm kind of leaning towards elimination, but I would need a calculator for that. And since the TEK is formulating systems, here it is. You formulated it, you created it, you made the equations from words. So well done. So I don't want to spend a lot of time. We'll look at solving these a little bit later. Let's move on to the next problem. And let's formulate the equations for this problem. Okay, let's take a look at the second one. We have a shipping company who charges a fixed amount for their services and a certain amount per mile they must travel. If a 50-mile trip costs $112 and an 80-mile trip costs $157, find the fixed cost and the cost per mile. Okay, so remember what I said. When you're doing word problems and you're setting up equations, you want to first define your variables. So you're going to look for the question. Well, it says right here, find. What are we trying to find? We're trying to find the fixed cost. So the first thing I want to do is I need a variable for fixed cost. Okay? And I'm looking for the cost per mile. So I'm going to have 2 variables. So I'm going to go ahead and use C to represent fixed cost. Now, any letter will work, just so you know. Any letter will work. You could use an F, you could use X or Y. Okay? And the cost per mile, I'm going to go ahead and just call that C. Whoops, sorry, got C on my brain. Can't do that, can I? Can't have the same variable, so it gets a little confusing. But later, you know what, there's actually a way to use the same variable, but and that's by using a subscript number to represent two different variables, even though the letter is the same. Let's use mile, so let's use M, which is what I wrote down on my paper. For some reason, I got C stuck in my brain. Cost per mile. Okay, next thing you want to do once you have your variables defined, you go back and you kind of read the first thing. It says if a 50-mile trip. Okay, now think about this. You're going 50 miles. Okay, so it says that M is the cost per mile. So if I want to find out this cost, I would take the 50 miles times M. So let's say that each mile costs $1. So 50 times $1, it'd be $50. Okay? So a 50-mile trip costs $112. Okay? So this is going to be our total cost. So this does not represent this. Okay, this is how much the total trip costs. Look at what it says. A shipping company charges a fixed amount for their services and a certain amount per mile they must travel. So these two things added together is going to give us our total trip cost. Now, if you're like me, sometimes you have to read it once, twice, 3 times to get your mind wrapped around what's going on here. So we're going to do 50 times M, okay, to find out how much it's going to cost per mile, plus whatever they're going to charge as a fixed cost, so C. So these two things added together is going to have a total of $112 for the trip. This represents the total trip, and this also represents the total trip. Okay, let's keep moving. Now they give us another example. So we have an 80-mile trip, costs $157. So again, 80-mile trip, so we're going 80 miles. We have to multiply that times the cost per mile. So again, if the cost per mile was $1, it'd be $80 plus the fixed amount they charge for their services, which we do not know, equals $157. That's the total trip cost. And we have formulated our system of equations. All right. Now, if I was solving this, I would use the elimination method. Again, because my C's are the same. So I could very easily draw a line here, subtract the two equations, and cancel out my C's. C minus C would be 0. And then that way I could solve for M. And that would give me my miles, my cost per mile. And then I could plug that back in for the M and solve for C. But let's keep going with our formulating. Turn the page. Okay, here we go. Just remember, the big thing about writing equations from these problems is that the more familiar you get with how to write them, the easier they become. Okay, so let's look at number 3. Go ahead and pause the video and read it to yourself, please. Okay, so let's define our variables. What is it that we're looking for? we're looking for how many coffees did they sell. Okay, and coffees, how many coffees is represented by cups. See right here, cups. We want to know how many cups of coffee. Okay, but in this problem, when we set up the two equations, we don't just have coffee cups, we also have, that's right, good job, we also have hot chocolate cups. So we're going to need a variable for both of them. Even though we're only trying to solve for coffees, we need both variables in order to set up the equations. So let's go ahead and use H for hot chocolate. So finding the variables, finding what you're looking for is half the battle. The pound sign means number. So number of hot chocolate cups, number of coffee cups. Okay, so here we go. So we know here it says that chocolate sells for 75 cents. So 75 cents for each hot chocolate. So times H plus 50 cents for each coffee cup. And that's going to be, now notice this represents the amount of money, and so it has to total, what do you think, $2.95 or $200? Good, that's right, money, $200, very good. Now we know that we have 295 cups. This is one of those total problems. Okay, so we got money totaling money, and then we need to have cups totaling cups. So we have so many hot chocolate cups plus so many coffee cups is going to total the total number of coffee cups. All right, moving on. Getting low on time here. Okay, this one's a little bit more tricky, number 4. You might have to read it through a couple times. We're looking for the amount invested at each rate. So since there's 2 rates, we have 2 different amounts. So since this is kind of very general, vague, you could use F for 5% or an E for 8%, but I'm just going to use X and Y. So I'm just going to use X as the amount. So I have the X and the Y, the 2 different amounts invested at the 2 different percentages. So I'm going to ask you to try to set these up. I'm going to check your paper tomorrow and see what 2 equations you came up with. Okay? And also, if you wouldn't mind, please go ahead and give number 5 a try and set up the 2 equations for number 5. And I hope you guys are keeping up with all of your schoolwork. And I can't wait to see you guys tomorrow in class.